Hey everyone, I've been sitting on this for a while, unsure if I should share it or not. It's been a tough couple of months, and I'm still trying to figure out how to process everything. I'm hoping writing this out will help me make sense of it all and maybe get some advice on how to handle it. So, to give you a little background, my mom passed away 2 years ago. Losing her was by far one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. We were incredibly close, and it felt like my whole world crumbled when she was gone. She had been sick for a while, so we kind of knew it was coming, but no amount of preparation could have gotten me ready for when it actually happened. My dad was devastated too. He and my mom had been together for over 30 years, and they were each other's everything. After she passed, it was just me and him trying to figure out how to keep going. The first year was rough. He mostly kept to himself, barely talked about his feelings. I didn't push him to open up, though, because I figured he was grieving in his own way. I was trying to do the same while still taking care of him. There were moments that helped. When we'd go through old family photos or reminisce about the good times with my mom, those little things felt like steps forward, even though there were days when it felt like we were just going through the motions, trying to survive. But then things started to change. My dad began to get distant. He started going out more, which was strange because he was never really social before. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was trying to get back to some sort of normal life, maybe making new friends or hobbies. But I couldn't ignore that something felt off. He was being secretive. If I asked where he was going or what he was up to, he would brush me off like it wasn't important. It started to bug me, but I didn't want to push him. I didn't want to make him feel like he had to explain himself. But I couldn't help it. I was starting to get suspicious. Then last week, I was at my dad's house, just cleaning and organizing. As I was going through some drawers in his office, I found something that made my heart drop. At first, it just looked like a pile of old paperwork. But then I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. A marriage certificate. I picked it up and stared at it, feeling like I was seeing things. The date on the certificate said my dad had remarried 6 months ago. 6 months! I couldn't believe it. I had no idea. No one had mentioned anything, and he hadn't said a word about it. I kept reading the certificate over and over, hoping I was mistaken, but no, it was real. I was hit with a mix of shock, anger, and betrayal. How could he do this? How could he get married and not tell me? How could he hide something so huge from me for months? I kept asking myself over and over why he hadn't told me. Did he think I wouldn't approve? Did he think I didn't deserve to know? I knew I couldn't just sit on this, so I decided to confront him the next day. I wasn't sure how to go about it, but I knew I couldn't let it go. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I needed answers. When I asked him about it, he didn't seem surprised. He just kind of sighed and said something like, "I knew this day would come eventually." It felt like he was brushing it off, and I wasn't having it. I asked him why he didn't tell me, and his response was that he didn't want to upset me. He said he thought it would be better to keep it quiet until I was ready to accept it. Ready? Ready for what? How was I supposed to accept something I didn't even know was happening? He went on to explain that he had met his new wife about a year after my mom passed away. He said it wasn't planned. They met through mutual friends, and it just happened. He said he wasn't trying to replace my mom, just that he'd found someone who made him happy again. He kept repeating that he thought he was protecting me by not telling me, but all I felt was betrayed. I told him exactly that. Keeping something like this a secret was the opposite of protecting me. It felt like he had been living an entirely different life behind my back. He apologized, but it didn't feel sincere. It felt like he was just trying to smooth things over without really understanding why I was so hurt. After that, I left. I didn't know what to say or how to process everything. I needed time to think. It felt like I didn't know my dad anymore. How could he move on so quickly? How could he marry someone else without even considering how it would affect me? I get that he's an adult and can make his own choices, but I'm his child. We were supposed to go through this together. I thought we were in this together, grieving the loss of my mom. But now it felt like he had moved on and left me behind. Since that conversation, I've been avoiding going to his house. I don't know how to face him, let alone his new wife. I haven't even met her yet. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Part of me feels like I should try to be understanding, but another part of me feels blindsided and betrayed. I don't know what to do with all these emotions. I'm angry, confused, and so incredibly sad. I'm writing this because I need some outside perspective. Am I being unreasonable? Should I just try to accept this and move on? Or do I have a right to be upset about how he handled all of this? I feel like my dad betrayed my trust, and now I don't know how to fix our relationship. Has anyone else been through something similar? How do you even begin to deal with a situation like this? I want my dad to be happy, but I'm really struggling with how he's gone about all of this. Any advice would be really appreciated. Hey guys, first off, thank you to everyone who offered their support and shared their stories after my last post. It helped a lot more than I can explain, and I really appreciated the advice. I took a few days to cool off after that initial confrontation with my dad. Honestly, I didn't know what to do with all the emotions I was feeling. Anger, hurt, confusion. It was like everything had been turned upside down. For those of you who said I should try to understand where my dad was coming from, I took that to heart. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, and I started to wonder if maybe he wasn't trying to hurt me on purpose. Maybe he really did think he was protecting me. It didn't make what he did okay, but maybe there was some truth in his fear of how I'd react. Still, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't keep avoiding the situation. I couldn't let it fester. So after a few days of not talking to him, I decided to reach out. I texted him and asked if we could meet up for coffee. I didn't want to go back to his house yet. Everything there felt too heavy, too loaded with the tension between us. I figured a neutral spot would be better to start the conversation. We met up at a small coffee shop in town. When I saw him, I could tell he was nervous. I was too. I hadn't talked to him since our argument, and I didn't know what to expect. We sat down at a table, and for a moment, there was this awkward silence between us. It was like we were both trying to figure out how to start, what to say. I didn't waste time. I told him how I'd been feeling, how blindsided I was when I found out he had remarried, how hurt I felt that he'd kept it from me for so long. I tried to stay calm, even though every part of me wanted to scream. I wanted him to understand that it wasn't just about him getting remarried. It was about the fact that he didn't even give me the courtesy of telling me. To his credit, he didn't try to interrupt or make excuses this time. He just listened. I think for the first time, he saw how deep this ran for me. He sat there quietly, nodding, taking it all in. When I was done, he looked at me and apologized again. But this time, it actually sounded like he meant it. He told me that he didn't know how to tell me. He was scared of how I'd react, scared that I wasn't ready to accept his new life. He said he didn't want to put any more on my plate, especially when I was still grieving my mom. He explained that when my mom passed, he felt lost, like his whole world was falling apart. And then, when he met his new wife, it wasn't like he was looking for someone to replace my mom. He just met someone who made him feel like he could be happy again. Hearing him say that actually hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own pain, my own feelings of betrayal, that I hadn't really stopped to think about how lost he must have felt too. He wasn't trying to replace my mom. He was just trying to move forward in whatever way he could. It didn't make what he did right, but it helped me understand where he was coming from. He also told me that he still missed my mom every day. He wasn't just moving on to forget her. He said he'd always love her, but at some point, he had to find a way to live his life again. I think that was the moment I started to see things a little differently. He wasn't just trying to push me out of the picture. He was trying to find some semblance of peace for himself. We talked for a while about my mom, and I could tell that this conversation wasn't easy for him either, but it helped me see that he wasn't just being selfish or inconsiderate. He was grieving in his own way, even if it didn't match how I was grieving. At the end of the conversation, he asked me if I'd be willing to meet his new wife. I didn't know how to feel about that. Honestly, the thought of it made my stomach churn. I didn't feel ready, and I told him that. I told him I didn't know if I could handle it yet. but he said he understood, and we agreed that maybe it was something that would happen when I felt ready. It wasn't easy to walk away from that conversation feeling any better. There was no magic fix for the hurt I felt, but I did feel like we had at least started to understand each other again. Maybe I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I was starting to see him as a person who had made a mistake, not someone who had intentionally tried to hurt me. After that meeting, I took some time for myself. I didn't call my dad right away. I wasn't sure if I was ready to move forward or if I even could. But the one thing I did know was that I couldn't keep avoiding the situation forever. I've been thinking a lot about how I feel about his new wife, about how quickly everything has moved, and about how I fit into all of this. I want to be a part of my dad's life, but I don't want to pretend everything is okay when it's not. I know he deserves to be happy, but right now it's hard for me to accept this new chapter in his life. I feel like I'm stuck between wanting to make peace with it and still being so hurt by the way it all happened. I still don't know if I'll ever fully accept it, but I know I can't just bury my feelings anymore. It's going to take time, and I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm trying to move forward, step by step. Hey guys, I've been sitting with everything for a while now, thinking about my dad, his new wife, and where we go from here. I honestly wasn't sure if I should even write another update, but I feel like I need to put it out there. I've come to realize that this situation is bigger than just me being upset or angry with my dad. It's about understanding grief, how we all deal with it differently, and how things change when we least expect it. After that coffee meeting with my dad, I thought maybe I'd feel a bit lighter, like I'd have some answers or clarity. But honestly, it didn't make everything magically better. I still felt all kinds of things: confusion, sadness, anger, and even guilt. Guilt for not being more understanding of him, and guilt for not being able to accept his new life right away. I wanted to move past it. I wanted to feel like I could just accept that he had remarried. But it wasn't that simple. It never is. That said, I took the time to reflect, and I've realized that I've been holding on to a lot of expectations. Expectations about how my dad should grieve, about how long it should take for him to move on, and about how things were supposed to look after my mom passed. But the truth is, grief doesn't have a timeline, and it doesn't follow any rules. Just because my world was turned upside down doesn't mean my dad's wasn't too. I had to remember that. It also hit me that I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself to figure it all out right away. I don't need to be okay with everything in an instant, and I don't have to rush into accepting this new part of my dad's life if I'm not ready. What's been the hardest for me is not the idea of him being happy again. It's that I feel left behind. I feel like we're both grieving, but we're doing it in completely different ways. I feel like I've been stuck in the past, holding on to memories of my mom and the life we had, while he's trying to build a future without her. It's been a confusing time. My dad and I both lost someone we loved deeply, but I realized that I wasn't the only one who had to adjust to the changes. He had to adjust too. He had to find a way to live without her, to live without the person he thought he would spend the rest of his life with. And in that search for peace, he met someone new. It wasn't about replacing my mom, it was about finding something to hold on to. But even knowing that didn't make it easier for me to accept. A few days ago, I made a decision. After weeks of avoiding it, I agreed to meet his wife. Honestly, I was still scared. I didn't want to meet her. I wasn't ready to meet the person who had come into my dad's life so quickly. But I also knew I couldn't keep avoiding it forever. It wasn't fair to my dad, and it wasn't fair to me. I had to take that step, even if it was uncomfortable, even if I was scared. I was nervous the whole time leading up to it. I didn't want to go, but I told myself I had to at least give it a chance. The day we were supposed to meet, I felt sick to my stomach. I kept thinking, what if she's awful? What if I can't handle it? What if I just can't let go of my mom? I had a million questions running through my mind, but I also knew that if I didn't face this, I'd be stuck in the same place forever. When I showed up, it was awkward. There's no other way to put it. I could tell she was trying to make it easy, but the whole thing felt forced. I don't think either of us knew what to say. She smiled at me, and I just couldn't smile back. I felt so distant, so closed off. Everything about the situation felt wrong. She kept asking about my work and hobbies, trying to make small talk, but I could barely respond. It was like I was on autopilot, just nodding along, trying to get through it without breaking down. At one point, she said something that made me stop for a second. She said she understood this was hard for me and that she wasn't trying to replace my mom. It was a simple thing to say, but it meant something. I think I needed to hear it, even if it didn't make everything magically better. It wasn't just that she said the right words. It was that I could tell she wasn't trying to be my mom. She wasn't trying to step into my mom's shoes. She was just trying to be her. And for the first time, I started to see her as a person, not just this figure that I felt was intruding in my life. That doesn't mean I suddenly liked her or felt comfortable with the whole thing. I wasn't ready to start calling her family, but I felt like I could at least see her for who she was. She wasn't the problem, even though I'd spent so much time blaming her for everything that was changing in my life. By the end of the lunch, I felt a little bit lighter, but not much. I didn't walk away thinking, everything's fixed now. It wasn't that simple. But I felt like I had made some progress. It was a start. I agreed to meet with her again, but I told my dad that it was going to take time. I wasn't going to be able to just pretend everything was fine. I'm still working through everything. I still don't know how I feel about my dad's new life or about how quickly he moved on after my mom passed. I don't know if I'll ever feel fully okay with it, but I think I'm starting to accept that my dad deserves to be happy, even if that happiness looks different from what I imagined. I know it's going to take time, and I'm not expecting everything to be perfect. I'm still grieving, and I know he is too. But I also know that if we're going to have a relationship, I need to be open to moving forward, even if it's slow. I don't want to lose my dad over this, but I also need to honor my feelings and my grief. It's a balance I'm still trying to find, but I think I'm getting there, bit by bit.